Hey everyone, welcome to another fabulous Sales Hacker webinar. This is going to be one for the books. I am so thrilled about this discussion because we're really pivoting to talk about moving from a sales role to an ops role, and we have two amazing speakers with us today. Jackie, I would love for you to introduce yourself first.
Hello, my name is Jackie. I've been in tech sales since 2015. First as a BDR, and then the dessert of my day ended up being Salesforce and outreach and hooking it all up. So I moved towards that, and now I'm a full-time Salesforce consultant, building fun things in Salesforce for lots of different companies.
I love that. Absolutely. And we're going to get into the whole transition, all of that. But most importantly, where are you located?
Oh, I'm in Boston, and I work for a boutique Salesforce consultancy called Eustace Consulting. Yeah.
Awesome. Love it. Manas, welcome. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're coming from.
It's always hard to follow Jackie. Jackie and I actually both started in Teach for America, which is a crazy coincidence. So, first thing for me was a high school math teacher out in San Francisco, and then I transitioned into the crazy world of SaaS startups. First at a marketing tech company, and then soon to a startup researching other startups, and then came here to Spring Health in a RevOps capacity. Spring Health is a mental health tech company, so really excited to be in this space now. I went from teacher to SDR to operations, and now doing RevOps finally.
I love that.
Yours.
Wow. I gotta tell y'all, so it's always fun for me whenever I hear that other people have had like random spouts of education in their careers, because that's always like my little two truths and a lie of, oh, I taught 7th grade English for a year. The Lord did not bless me with patience for 7th graders. I love meeting people who have had a heart for teaching that have last longer than I. So, but that is not what we are here for today, everyone. Like I said, you are in for a treat. We are talking all things making the move from our sales roles to RevOps, what you are doing today that even plays in the RevOps space. I know for me, that's been something super interesting to see. And then what you can do instantly today to start preparing yourself for that leap. And then for those of you who are already starting to make that transition, things you can tighten up. Those that just made that transition, things you should know. Some of the, not warning signs necessarily, but some of these some of these roles are not all the same. So we're going to get into what that looks like, and our fabulous speakers are going to tell us some things that they wish they knew as we wrap up today. So before we jump into it, I'm so excited to have all of you here. We're going to go over a little bit of housekeeping real quick. So one, yes, this is being recorded. We always send out our webinar recordings within 24 hours. So keep an eye on your email. If you have to drop, no big deal. Check your email tomorrow afternoon. You'll have the webinar there, and it is always available at saleshacker.com under training and events. Secondly, we want to hear from all of you. This conversation is really for you guys and gals and everyone in between, and making sure that you're asking the questions now so that you can be better prepared for the future is so important. So if you look at the very bottom, there's a little Q&A box in there. Drop your questions. You can ask them anonymously if you want to. Also, put them in the chat because we'll be going through there as well. We're going to ask some polls today, so jump on those real quick so we can get into it. And I think that's it. So let's get started. We're going to start off with a poll real quick. We want to know who you are. Are you SDRs? Are you AEs? Are you managers, directors? If these titles don't fit you, tell me who you are in the chat. We want to make sure that we're able to give you some good representation in today's conversation. Wow, we've got a lot of SDRs.
Katie, I can't see any results. You're killing me right now.
I'm the only one that gets to see this poll right now.
This is not fair.
Look at this in the chat, though. We've got Salesforce admin. You are solo, Rachel. You are a hero. You may not feel like it sometimes, but I promise you are a hero for your sales teams. Okay, let's end this. Look at this. So, outside of everyone in the chat where we've got recruiters, enablement, Salesforce admins, sales ops, we've got a lot of reps here. So, this is going to be an awesome conversation. So, to kind of frame all of you up for what we're going to talk through today, is really going to be about the investigation. Do we make this move? Preparation. What do I need for this move? And the reality of what this looks like. So, to get started, we're going to kind of dig into, should you even make the transition from the sales life to the ops world? So, I guess I would love to hear, whoever wants to come out at bat on this first. I want to hear from you. What made you make that transition? And like maybe one or two resources that was really helpful for you during that time.
I can start. So I started as a BDR, and just my passion was outbound prospecting. Crushed it, became a team lead, manager, director of business development. And at my last company, I was at Link Squares. And probably like 2 years ago, I got so sick. I ended up with pneumonia, completely lost my voice for like 2.5 months. And I was totally out of work for over a month. And when I came back, my BDR team was doing not only fine, but better than ever. And first I was like, ouch, don't you need me? But then, like, after I took the ego gut punch, I was like, hey, the thing that I was hired to build is built. So that means that I can go build something else, because I do know that I love building. I'm not so great at maintaining. So talk to my bosses. I was like, you know what? The dessert of my day more and more is like the plumbing, like the back end of Salesforce, hooking up outreach to Salesforce, getting insights from DataFox and getting the alerts ready, and tinkering with account scoring modeling, pulling out insights. And I pitched, I was like, hey, how about I transition into that full time? And they were like, well, let's do it. We're going to kind of miss you, but yeah. And that's how I made my transition. And I loved it.
Did you think it was kind of risky for you to make that move? Or like what was, like Isabel said, there was lack of organization and process. There needed to be that infrastructure. Was that something for you as well, where you were just like, you know what? Obviously the team's doing well. I did what I needed to do, and now I want to make things better for these reps too. Was that kind of a play into that as well?
Yeah, and I think especially I saw a bunch of you are managers and directors, so you've probably been around the block and you're really good at what you do and you're making great money. So for me, it was a question of how can I best impact my team, my company? Great individual contributor, hated managing, but really good coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I realized that it was my ability to be able to replicate myself, to codify, to scale what it is that I did to make things happen, and kind of integrate things that I'm seeing, like the persona that we thought was not so great ended up being our highest conversion rate, right?
Wow.
Pulling out those insights and being like, hey guys, hey guys, hey guys. And it was really the recognition that I'm really good at all the things, but I could make the most highest and best use of me in that role.
Yeah, that's awesome. Manas, what about yourself? What made you want to make that shift? And maybe what was the inspiration, or like some things that you had to consider whenever you were deciding if that was for you?
Yeah, I didn't actually even start thinking about ops until my second sales role. The BDR team that I joined, BDR, SDR, ADR, BDR team that I joined was a lot bigger. And so one thing I realized when I was getting onboarded and trained is everyone had like their own sort of tips and tricks and parts of their process that they that were making them successful. And there was definitely some good knowledge sharing, but an opportunity for a lot more of just sort of sharing of best practices. And so I found myself like after my, X amount of cold calls or after booking X amount of meetings, I love how Jackie put it, sort of the dessert of my day or the things that I was doing in my free time were similar to Jackie, what you just said, right? Like figuring out what that person was doing really well in their process or how are they using these tools to improve the workflow. I think for the most of the folks on the call right now are SDRs, and I think you might probably agree that a lot of the SDR workflow is very repeatable, right? And so I think, especially in the SDR role, like process improvements, things to make things faster, take less clicks, speed things up a little bit, makes a huge difference at the end of the day because it's those processes over and over again, right? So I think the thing that was inspiring to me is seeing all these different best practices across the board and having an opportunity to kind of collect those and then share them with the team. So I feel like I got into it in a bit of like an enablement front. But like I mentioned, I taught algebra for a couple of years, and I think like one of the things that I loved about algebra is that it's using numbers to solve problems, right? And so I think in us figuring out, hey, like where can we be doing better in our process? Jack, you mentioned conversion rates. Which territories, which industries seem to be like the most ripe for us to go after? So using numbers to sort of answer some of these questions and solve those problems was giving me a lot of energy. And I'll end with this last thing, which is super cheesy, but I remember being out with some cousins at a bar in India. There was this little plaque that said, whatever you do in your free time is what you should be doing full time, which I think is just another way of saying the kind of like what is the dessert of your day, right? And for me, it was all that extra stuff of like building the trackers and running the analysis and figuring out like process hacks and how to help the team. So I got so much more energy from doing that than like delivering a kick-ass demo, right? Or like running a discovery call. And that's explicitly to say that some of my colleagues loved that, and that was the dessert of their day. And I just found that for me, like my energy was coming from kind of a different place that ended up aligning really closely with sales ops.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely amazing advice as we're all considering, because right now, like, ops is like this super sexy phrase, right? This is all over LinkedIn. It's just like the hot new thing. So everyone's saying, oh, maybe I should go into it. And so just hearing from both of your testimonies of, either frustrations that may have driven you to it or realizing like you both have brought up of, just where your heart is at. And I think that's something so often in sales organizations where if you're on a sales team, like you have to have like a certain mentality or you have to be very like, pound the phone, super hunter focused. And if that's not really where your heart's at and you love making Salesforce reports, like there's your sign. As we go back to our Jeff Foxworthy references, there's your sign. Because that might be, that really may be your sign of, hey, this is not my cup of tea, but I really like this instead, And for others, it's, I love the relationship side of sales, but I really don't like the awkwardness of like pushy selling. So maybe account management might be more your thing. So that's so incredibly interesting. Thank you both for sharing those. What were some resources, Manas, that you really relied on whenever you were looking at this transition? Were there people you talked to about this, or were you just kind of like, YOLO, and we're going for it?
Yeah, a little bit of YOLO maybe. I really do think like a huge disclaimer for me is that so much of it came down to like working at the company that allowed me to consider a path outside of sales, right? And so I'd say the first resource was the people. And specifically like my manager at the time who was open to that idea, our CRO at the time who helped champion for me, and then absolutely the head of sales ops who not only was open to the idea but excited about it, and then sort of like took me under his wing, gave me things to work on, and again sort of championed for me. So I think the people is sort of like definitely a huge part of that, and timing and circumstance definitely helped. One of the things I was going to say, which I know is something we'll probably talk about later, is like what would I have done differently. I think probably the single biggest like accelerator of my learning and development and operations has been these like communities, whether it's these Slack communities like Wizards of Ops or RevOps Co-op, or even just the community of operations people on LinkedIn, just sharing a lot of strategic, but even like tactical advice. So I think learning about that even sooner would have been super helpful in thinking about, do I really want to do this? Is this the right move for me? But even once I got into the job, they ended up being really, really helpful. One recommendation I would have for SDRs now in sort of figuring out the investigation piece of this, and equally a resource, is a list of just problems at your company. I don't know any other way to say it, right? So like engineers will talk about bug lists, and so making lists of bugs and errors and things that could be easier. And I think I got some of my fellow SDRs to help me make a list of all of the crap that we could fix and make, better and easier. And that actually was a huge resource to help me figure out, is this stuff that I would enjoy working on? It helped me get ammo for my interviews and like make a case for myself. And then it also really helped me think about like, what are some of the first things that I can work on in coming into the role. So just to be concise, I think people and support. I think like bugs and errors, right, and being proactive about finding problems. And then I think lean on people outside of your organization and communities and that sort of thing to learn about what this world is really all about.
I love that. Asking questions and identifying problems. I mean, really, you're being a sales rep. Right? You're trying to identify problems inside the organization and asking questions about them. Is anyone doing anything to fix this? If not, I can do this, and therefore you provide job security for yourself. So it's really a win-win-win. Jackie, what about yourself? What has been some resources that you had to think about, or maybe now reflecting back on this transition for you, and resources that you wish you would have tapped into?
Oh, yeah. Well, for me, it was all about solving what was in front of me. And for that, what I purchased outreach, and for one seat. And I had to like prove it out, right? And it was like the peak community, and just like tracking down people who knew what I was supposed to do, because I couldn't afford the onboarding. Right? Yeah. And so it's out there, right? So like figuring out what the thing is that you need, and just kind of, for me, I need to talk about it and be like, okay, this is what I need, da 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 da, and like talk to people who have either done it or almost have done it, or kind of know what you need to do. And from there, it just kind of grew into, like Mana said, finding those communities. So the first one, it was the RevOps community. It's mostly Boston based. I was introduced as I was kind of going down this path. One of my bosses was like, "Oh, you should meet Phoebe." So if anyone knows Phoebe Barber, shout out. So I had lunch with her, and I was like, "Okay, I want to be you when I grow up." She's like, but so she got me into the Slack community and going to meetups, and just I used my SDR cold call stuff. I would just like attack people on Slack. They're like, "Hey, I need help. Will you help me?" And I think if you go in with like a pure heart and willingness to learn, especially in the ops, like all I want to do is help, right? Like that's why we get into the whole thing. So if anything, I think I would have been less shy, or less like self-conscious about asking for help, tracking down people, get in their LinkedIn DMs, find them on the Slack, and just like attack them nicely. And like try to do your own kind of preliminary Googles or asks around before you like ask someone, or even in the general kind of Slack. There's Ohana Slack if you're on Salesforce. There's WizOps if you're more operations, like cross-functional. And what else was? Oh yeah, and so just get the help. For me, it's about the people. I know, Katie, you love research, right? So I'm not so much about the research. I am about just getting in there, figuring it out, and with people.
I love that. And one thing I think that you pointed out so interesting is no matter where you go in life, having a strong sales foundation is so valuable. Because just like what you said, I see this in my own life, whether it's with school stuff or in day-to-day community work, where I cold call people all the time, and I still get so nervous writing emails because I'm like, oh no, what if they think this sounds stupid? So it's always very interesting seeing how that translates. And I'm a huge fan of asking for help, like you said, and making sure you do the research, right? Like, don't be asking people for things that you could easily find on your own on Google, right? Like, come prepared with questions about what you found. Now, Brittany asked us a really, really good question, and it's, what are the top 3 skills for sales ops that are the most important to cultivate? So as we're looking at making this transition, and I think we'll kind of transition into preparation right now, this part of the discussion. What are some top skills that you should be planning and preparing for?
I can take this one. Just real quick shout out to Rhythm's last comment about how Jackie's one of the most amazing people in the sales app space. I will say, like,
I've attacked her
in
several
in
times.
answers, yeah, she is dope. Like, no way around it. She's incredible. I think, like, um, it's one example of the how do you figure out if it's for you, but also how do you prepare. And uh, the communities is one thing, right? And so reaching out to people and like just posting questions, getting answers, and even just like keeping track of what other people are asking in these communities, just to kind of absorb the information. Jackie responds to like 400 Salesforce requests a day, and I think like a couple weeks ago hopped on with me to walk through a flow thing, right? So I can't reiterate enough, just like lean on the resources outside of your org. Different perspectives, different business models, I think were like some of the best things to learn from, and then to kind of apply to our current situation. Um, the Back to this sort of like top 3 skills question. I think that's always an interesting one, because I think the cop out sort of holds, which is it depends on like what the scope of the role is, right? So I think there are probably some technical skill sets and some things that might be more apt for some roles rather than others, especially since ops is such a big umbrella. But I will say a few things that keep coming up that I keep noticing or I keep hearing about, are the things that I really admire in some of my ops colleagues who I follow and learn from. One is definitely empathy, and I think empathy in a few ways. One, like as an ops person, like Jackie said, right? There's such a need to such a want to help consistently, and helping works really well when you know exactly who you're helping and why you're helping them, and what's the best way to help them. And this is where I would tell all the folks who have spent time in sales on the call, like, this is what you spend all your day doing, right? Is figuring out like what the person on the end of the line is going to benefit most from, what their needs are, what their pains are. And so you've already done this. And I think it's one of the reasons why like sales is actually a wonderful foundation for moving into operations. One, that skill, but 2, those same salespeople are the folks you end up helping out in the ops seat, right? And so I think the empathy piece is huge. The second one, I would say, is what an old manager of mine called synthesis, which is basically being able to say, like, okay, here's ultimately, out of all of this noise, the problem we've got to solve, and here's the path to get there. And I think being able to like construct that, here's where we are now, here's where we need to be, and ideally be able to take that from some kind of data or insight, being able to architect that like way to get to the better place is a big part of I think like what you end up doing in ops. Um, you can keep going down the list. I don't even want to like necessarily say there are only 3, right? But the last one that I will say that happens a lot now is this constant like context switching between having to be super strategic and high level and 40,000 foot, and then super tactical and technical at like 40 inches, right? And I think one meeting is the strategic one, and then right afterwards you've got like the tactical one. I can't stab with my right hand. I don't know why. But the like constant juggling between those two things and being able to do that is, I think, a really really powerful thing in operations. And the last thing I'll just quickly say here before passing off to Jackie is, there is no world in which like you get all of that at 100% before you go into an operations role, right? And I think so much of those things came from kind of being in the weeds, like Jackie said, like, just kind of getting in there and doing the job, and doing that all the time. So I remember in the beginning, I had to tell myself, like, Manas, it's fine. Like, you'll sort of get there, and over time, it sort of just comes.
Yeah, for sure. In the chat, I posed the question, like, what are your top strengths? Like, everyone just like kind of reflect back and like, what are you really good at? Like, what do you really value? What are you really good at? So for me, yeah, I remember I took like the Clifton Strengths top 5. I think it's like $30. You can take it. And everything, I'm like an activator, positivity, right? Individuality. So all those things just kind of color my experience in RevOps. I think even if you don't have to be like me or be like Manas, like you can just bring your whole self to ops. And I think what's really, really important at the end of the day is exactly what we already said, was that empathy, having that heart of service. Like you have internal stakeholders. Like you exist to make other people better. And the other two that I think you need no matter what is just a really, really intense curiosity. Like, do people get upset with you because you ask too many questions? Like, are you like trying to read people's emails behind their back? Like, are you just like deeply and upsettingly sometimes aggressively curious? That's a sign that ops is good for you. And the other thing is just like kind of with sales too, but grit. Really being able to sit with and almost enjoy the torture that is trying to like get a flow to work or whatever the thing is. But having that deep curiosity and grit and heart of service, it'll help you stretch through things that you're not that great with. Like, I was a kindergarten teacher. I was not a high school math teacher or middle school math teacher. And so when I kind of went down a rabbit hole of account scoring, I was like, oh, I actually need stats. I need stats. I need the Z-scores. And I like barely passed stats in college, like barely. But that curiosity and grit and like heart of service, that's what kind of pulls you through. Yeah.
Can I say one other just quick thing on that? Like, I couldn't agree more with Jackie's idea of like the heart of service and like just wanting to help. I think that was one of the more attractive things for me about getting into ops is like, I had a quota and a commission, and that was my laser focus for the month and the quarter. And then transitioning into, okay, I can kind of ease off of the number, and now my goal is like, how many people can I help quickly, and so on. I think actually, though, one of the hardest parts is having to choose like not to help that SDR in that moment because there's a bigger thing going on, right? Or like choosing not to get that manager the report they need because we got to finish our OKRs or finish this like deck to the board, right? And so I think a big challenge for me that I definitely still haven't figured out 100% is the sort of like ruthless prioritization that needs to happen, where you're juggling like business and company priorities versus also like how do you maintain good relationships internally and kind of get check off the sort of we're here to serve the reps and the teams that we're supporting, right? So I think juggling that is definitely a challenge, and I think it was a big switch for me moving from sales on into operations because I found myself as an SDR especially wanting to really make sure I'm like catering to the needs of every prospect that I talk to, and within reason. So that was definitely a big shift, and absolutely I think goes back to the question of like what are the skills that really help on the ops side.
That is so interesting. Johanna posted, couldn't agree more with exactly this. Prioritization is the most important and challenging part. And I think that's something so many of us deal with. And in sales, it's so often overlooked as like, oh, well, that's just part of the work hard, play hard culture. That's just part of the hustle culture, right? Is to have all these things and say, yeah, I can make all this happen. And then you see this huge rise in mental health problems and stress, and your attrition is going up the wazoo because people are leaving because they can't handle this anymore and they don't know how to say no. And for me, we've had this conversation on some of these webinars of really learning how to say, hey, great question, I can definitely help you with this. what's your timeline on this? Oh, it's by this date. Okay, I've got this due at that time also. So here's what I can either, put that to the back burner and have to delay that. Are you comfortable with that? Is this more important than that? And like just being open about that, and I would have to imagine if you have a manager that pushes back on that, like maybe your manager should reevaluate. And if you are a manager and listening and that's something you do, just know like your reps and the people underneath you are trying their best to accomplish everything that they possibly can. But there's only so many hours in the day. And I mean, I would love to take a poll of like how many people actually work more than 8 hours a day, because I know, especially in ops, y'all are working all the time. So it's good to kind of push back, like Jackie said.
One other just add to I love the question that you just asked as far as like how to prioritize. One that a colleague of mine likes to ask that I think is really helpful is, if we don't get this done, what is that going to prevent you from doing? Right? Or like if we do get this done, what is that going to unlock or enable you to do? Because I feel like, when do you need this by? When I've asked this before, or like, how important is this? The default is like, I need it yesterday, right? Or this is the most important thing. And so I think asking folks to be a bit more specific about like, what is the checkbox that we're helping you check, it gives us a little bit more ammo in figuring out like truly what's the importance.
Sorry, exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that, because it's just so easy. It's just so easy to just say yes all the time without asking deeper questions. So it's definitely a growth mindset type of conversation. As we continue our conversation around being prepared, we had a question earlier that was asking about the gaps. And so whenever you looked at making this move, surely you had to have had a moment where you said, oh shit, I may not know what I'm doing. and then you said, what do I need to learn to get there? So what were maybe some of those gaps between you as a seller transitioning to you as an ops person that you had to overcome, and like maybe a resource or two that helped with that?
I was blissfully ignorant of like I knew I didn't know anything, but like now looking back, I'm like, oh, like it was months before I realized that you could do record types in Salesforce. I was like, and like months after that, I was like, oh, there's this, you can do sandboxes. like like sometimes it's almost good that you don't know how woefully unprepared you are. But the absolute truth is, you will never know how to do all the things. And that's one of the things I love about like Salesforce and RevOps. Like, it's compelling to me because it's like, I'll never be able to like, whoop, figure that one out. Like, next. Even if you do, there's new tech, there's new functionality, there's new evolving best practices, right? So accepting that there's no way you're never gonna know it all, and not being offended if you come up against something you're like, I don't know anything of, I didn't even know what a price book was. Like, but I think what was helpful was, for me, it was mostly like Salesforce. I knew nothing about Salesforce. So I hopped onto Trailhead. You can start with the beginner admin trail and go. And also, like, if you hate doing it, maybe push back on that being your thing. Maybe, but like if you do have that kind of like, I'm going to figure this out, go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. You're never going to know all the things is like so true. And I think probably a lot of folks on the call, like that, that all kind of going into it. There were so many gaps. I think the ones that folks probably think about the most, there was also a question about this in the Q&A, right? Like, what are some of the ways to brush up the technical skills? I think the technical ones are the gaps that probably stand out most quickly, because you started ops and now you have access to your whole tech stack and you're like, shit, how do I do any of this, this stuff? The other one, which is super fun, is when folks are slacking you and like, hey, this is broken, how do I do this? bear with me. Let me go Google it for 10 minutes and try to figure out because I don't know either, right? Like I think so. I think the technical ones are obvious, and I ditto Jackie on the fact that there are resources like Trailhead and so on. I would say it's a balance between definitely being proactive and using the stuff out there, but then accepting that so much of it is just going to come through doing the job, which is I think something we pointed out earlier, uh, and to be okay with that, right? I think that's definitely part of it. Um, the other gaps, or yeah, I'd say the stuff that I didn't have as much exposure to, maybe being on the sales side, and I think maybe the managers and directors on the call, maybe not so much would relate to this, is actually like having to have the seat at the table and then make the decision and own it, right? And I think like having to be accountable for that was a gap that I didn't have exposure to, or something that I definitely had to fill. I think when I was an SDR, I hit my cold calls. I hit my meetings booked for the month, my qualified opportunities, my revenue goals. There were boxes to check, right? And I could totally go above them, but there was at least a minimum requirement of, okay, I've definitely met my goals. And the world of operations, I think, is a lot more ambiguous and a lot less time bound and clear in terms of, what are those minimum check boxes that you need to get to. And so I think the bit of the like mental shift and I wouldn't even call it a gap. It's just getting from that side to the other was a little bit of a challenge. And a part of that is definitely having to say, okay, it's not just about me booking meetings now. Now it's about, hey, there's this big process or tools or data problem for us to go solve. I don't know what the deadline is, if there is one. I don't even know exactly what this thing is supposed to look like when we're finished. But now I need to own proposing that idea, keeping people up to date on what our progress is, selling the fact that that idea is the right one among five other things that we could do, and then at the end of the day, owning the end result, whether it's a thing that worked out or even more importantly, a thing that didn't. So I think beyond the obvious sort of like technical skills which come over time, I think there were some of these more like behavioral or like just like environmental or mindset shifts that were definitely new for me.
So one thing that you just kind of spoke on that I'd love for us to talk about more, because we also have a question. You said having a seat at the table was something that you just may not have been as prepared for because now people listen to you. And you do have to make those judgment calls and be like, yep, it's fine. Sure, like it'll work, right? And have that confidence. One of the questions is about imposter syndrome and feeling inadequate when you first entered into the space, and like maybe what were some strategies or I don't know, internal talk tracks even that helped you be like, no, I'm here for a reason. I know what I'm doing ish, but we're gonna figure it out. Like, what was something that whenever you finally got that seat that you had to deal with on that?
Yeah, two things I want to clarify real quick. One, I was super excited to have a seat at the table, right? Like that's one of the reasons why I think getting into ops is so exciting. The second thing is I definitely don't want to communicate that as an SDR or as a rep, you don't have a seat at the table. That's absolutely not true, right? I think one of the things to transition into the world of operations that Jackie, I think you alluded to as well, is like take the seat at the table and find the problems now and then propose the solutions, right? And I think like that is maybe one of the faster ways to even make the case for yourself to moving into the into the seat or into operations. um I think as far as like once you have the seat and preparing for that, and is that the question, by the way, that you want me to answer, is like how did I make that adjustment?
Like, how did you kind of overcome the imposter syndrome that comes with that type of transition?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a fallacy to think that the imposter syndrome ever like completely goes away, right? Or it's this thing that you have, and then over time you like completely don't have. And I think situationally, like Jackie, you were saying that you can never really like understand all of it. I remember for my first 6 months in ops, I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and then slowly got better, and then I really fell into my groove, and I was owning marketing operations, and I got the chance to redesign our MQL score, which is this like huge project. And then I told my team, hey, I actually want to learn more beyond marketing. And the team restructured. I got to own other stuff. And then I was like a freshman again on day one, right? So the imposter syndrome is kind of like ups and downs. And yes, if Paul McCartney had imposter syndrome, then I'm okay that I had it too. I think like welcome the imposter syndrome, because on the other side of dealing with it is like learning something new and kind of picking something else up, right? So as cheesy as that sounds, I actually feel like while imposter syndrome is a real thing and that's a tough thing to get over, it's generally symptomatic that you're about to head into something that is like a new skill, a new domain, a new learning area. So I think part of the like growth mindset that you were talking about before is part of just enabling yourself to get to that place. But I would also lean back into a question you asked before, which are like, what are the resources, right? And I think one of the most helpful things that's available now is, I have imposter syndrome because I don't know how to do this thing. Okay, there are definitely people either at my company or outside of my company who have seen this, done this, succeeded with it, failed with it before. And so rather than kind of waiting for myself to figure out, because I know there are people way smarter than me, let me just pose the question immediately. Over the course of a week, I feel like I dropped 2 or 3 questions that are more strategic. How did you do this? What are the do's and don'ts in some of these communities? I don't always get actionable responses that I can apply here, but at least I'm kind of hearing about different people's thought processes. So I feel like a nice way to wrap that up is to say that like information and experience, whether you get it yourself or from someone else, is probably like the quickest cure to the imposter syndrome. Maybe sprinkled with a little bit of like, I'm going to get on the other side of this eventually.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jackie, dance with the imposter syndrome. I'm I love that. Yeah, because it's tough. We all have it, right? We all have times. Even I'm sure some of the top sales directors that are on this call could even say, sometimes I feel like I go into a meeting and I'm not even really sure why I'm there, but it's fine. So I think that's awesome. One of the questions I kind of wanted to talk about is, as we're preparing for this transition from sales to ops, um, maybe if you both could kind of explain, like, what does that type of career path look like, right? Like, do you go SDR to ops? Do you go SDR AE to ops? And like, how do you, maybe if you have like a talk track example of like how you talk with your manager to say, hey, I love what I'm doing. Please don't fire me, but I also don't want to be on your team anymore. So like, what does that look like? Because that's tough. That's awkward. So Jackie, you look like you have something, so I'll let you go first.
Um, I think this, if you've not yet dabbled, if you're like, if you've been an SDR or an AE, or even if you're a sales manager or director and you're like just kind of internally thinking that this might be a thing, I think for me it's like, if you have a bad day, have a beer and go to bed. If it's a bad 2 weeks, or if it's something that's really been on your mind for a couple months or something, I think that's when to bring it up. But in the meantime, just look around. There's something that somebody should get to, or something should be done. And if you don't have an idea, just ask, like, hey, what's the worst part of our sales tech stack or whatever, like, and just kind of give it your little almost side hustle to go attack it. And when you've come up with something, like, then talk to your manager, be like, hey, I noticed this, and Joey and Simone also noticed this too. So I just kind of did some thinking and did some research, and I've come up with this solution. Would this make sense, or can I implement it, or something like that? And just bit by bit, give yourself a reputation of doing, like, do the job before you get the title. But you have to do the job you're actually hired for, or if you've got a quota, you got to hit the quota. Then, like, you can do your side hustle. Like, don't ignore your job and do the side hustle, because everyone will be mad at you. Make everyone happy, be an awesome team player, and then do this on the side. And you know what? That's just what you got to do if you're wanting to make a transition.
Yeah, I really like that. That's something I've been talking with a lot of RevOps leaders recently, and that's been something, hearing how they've transitioned into this role. And his name's Rob Dandorf. I just adore him as a person, and he's really smart. And he has a really funny story. And he told me he went to law school and decided he didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. And he went into an SDR role, and he would go through like his annual reviews with his manager, like quarterly reviews, and be like, yeah, sure, I'll work on these things. But they both knew it wasn't probably going to happen, and it wasn't his strong suit. But he really loved making Salesforce reports, and he saw and figured out a way to like optimize what some of the things the team was doing. Then his manager came to him and said, hey, I think you might actually like this. And he's like, yeah, I think you're right. I'm not good at this. I'm better at this, and I'm making your company more money because of that. Like, obviously. So it's just really interesting. And I think you're so spot on of look for things, as sellers, we all talk with each other. We all complain about, how things are broken and all that stuff, but be thoughtful about how you can actually change that and come up with those strategies and implement them and then show them to your manager. So I think that's awesome advice. What about you, Manas? What do you think?
Yeah, a couple kind of quick things to hit. So one, one of the things I love most about like ops in the communities is how many like crazy cool paths I've seen from, like point to point to get into operations. Everything from like lawyers to like people in the medical profession to like singers to all sorts of really interesting stuff. So I feel like a lot ends up translating because at its core during an all hands we said like if RevOps is revenue operations and revenue is like making money and operations is how we do something better, then revenue operations is just like how do we make money better, right? How do we make money more efficiently, more effectively? And so I think that kind of also underscores this idea that you don't have to make a transition into operations to be more operational in your current role. And that's a shout out to anyone who's like a salesperson here or in sales management that wants to stay on that track and is just kind of curious about operations things. To Jackie's point, like there will always be something that should be done. There will always be a process that takes too many clicks or an insight that we don't have that we could have or information and best practices that live in all sorts of different places. And so I think like whether it's going into the operational role or it's just being more operational in your current role, I think there are kind of opportunities to take there. Something that I hope is actionable for folks on the line is something that I'm really glad I did in my own ops journey, which was sitting down at the time with our head of sales ops and our head of marketing ops and asking them, what do you like not have time for today that if you had a new hire, you would delegate to? And I remember those were like such a long list of things. Because despite how productive the teams are, there was always something else, right? And so there was this huge list. I made a Venn diagram, and there was a lot in the center. And I went to our CRO a few weeks afterwards, and I said, here are all the things that I think I can work on. Here is how I think they might shape up in like the next quarter, the quarter after that, and then the 2 quarters thereafter. And it was by no means anything super scientific. And if I look back now, I ended up doing only some percentage of all of that stuff. But one, it proved to them that I was serious. Two, it really focused on the business problem and not like here's why I'm good for the role. And then also was a really helpful kind of learning for me to figure out what are the sort of different things that again we could work on. So I'm happy to connect with anyone after this call and kind of share some of those insights and some of those like reflections. But if anyone is considering it, I think doing the like, hey, give me all of your problems, putting them on a page, figuring out which ones you're interested in, and then like proposing the stuff that you want to work on is a really, really helpful exercise. Whether again you want to make the formal switch or again you want to just be a bit more operational. I love that people are talking about the tech stack in the chats. That's great. I'm gonna look at this. I'm gonna look at this now.
Well, I love that. First off, I did not realize that we only have 10 minutes left. So this has been so much fun for me. I learned so much. And so we've really talked about investigating, right? Should I even go down this path? What does this even look like for me? Talk about some ways to be prepared, how to close that gap, resources, things to consider. And as we talk about kind of that next step in actually making it happen, I know that there's some realities that have now come to light for both of you, right? Things there's always things that pop up that you never even consider because you're like, maybe that might not happen. It's not even a thought. So I would love to hear from both of you on like what are some things to consider when looking at an ops role? And I know whenever we got on a prep call for this, we had talked about how every ops role is different. So if y'all wouldn't mind, whoever wants to go first, tell us about what does your day-to-day look like? And then, whoever goes second, tell us about what your day looks like and how it differs, and kind of give our participants a little bit of a better insight into what can be an ops role. So,
Yeah, I think this one, Jackie?
Yep. Oh, me or you? You, me, you.
I'll kick us off if that's all right. You, me. I just want to answer the question real quick on prioritization. I don't know if there's like one winning tool per se. We use Monday.com and absolutely love it. Super flexible, like easy visualization, all that good stuff, and integrates with a lot of other tools. I've used Jira in the past. Jira is great too. I know people love Trello and Airtable. So I feel like more important than that is like, what are the working collaboration operational things you've got to figure out? Like, how do people submit requests to us, right? How do we communicate with the broader team what we're working on? How do we quantify the amount of effort that these different requests are going to take? How do we quickly summarize how we're doing time over time? So like, I think those are the questions to answer, and then figure out whatever tool works for you. I think a lot of those are really kind of good options. I'll quickly summarize my day, or yeah, like I'll take today, and then I'll Jack, I'll pass it to you. So it's the beginning of a quarter. We're rolling out our OKRs. I think on the operational side, RevOps is a really interesting role in OKRs because you have OKRs, you're accountable for them, and then you're also responsible for collecting data that inform other people's OKRs. So I think it's like we spent a lot of time today making sure that the OKRs that folks came up with, and just for folks who are maybe newer to this, OKRs are objectives and key results. Super helpful way to think about like prioritization. So I had to pull some data to sort of support revenue leadership on how accurate or how reasonable some of those goals were. We're also rolling out retention tracking. So thinking about like over the course of the amount of time of these customers who were supposed to renew, what percentage of them were actually did renew in terms of the logos and the amount of revenue. Some of it is absolutely just responding to ad hoc requests, right? And I think that's a definite part of sort of anyone's operational day to day. And then super exciting and a little plug for us is we are hiring for our next role, a RevOps analyst role. So just coming up with like job description for that. So so the mix of like strategic planning, analysis, ad hoc technical stuff, and then like team planning and structure was kind of all went into my day. I would say just a quick roundabout back to the like task management and project management. One thing that is so helpful on the operations side is to figure out and classify what are the different types of work that we're responsible for, either things that we do proactively or things that come inbound as requests to us. Get really good at classifying those things, and then visualizing at the end of a week or end of a month, like where did our time go, right? Because it's such a fleeting sort of thing to at the end of the week to realize like I have no idea what I spent the time on. So I think a big part of the operations is analytics externally, but even just like reporting and understanding how your team is spending your time. Any of those tools I think will help in doing that.
I was gonna say something. I was just typing something. Wait, what was it? Oh, day in the life. See, this is why I need my Remarkable. Shout out to the Remarkable people. I have to write things down because I have I have the brain of a goldfish. It's fantastic.
Wait, is Remarkable? Okay, pause. Is Remarkable like Rocketbook?
So it's like
I want that.
Yes, it's made to feel like you're writing on paper. So if you're someone who likes to take notes, yeah, like for me, keeping notes, tap, it's just not the same. I need to doodle and really like like that. So I have a little digital notebook for each one. So you can do it this way or this way. There's all the different type, like you can do a marker, pencil, paintbrush, calligraphy,
One of
all
those.
this stuff. I got grid templates, you get line. Anyway,
I love that.
life changing. Oh,
Back to life. Day in the life.
day-to-day life. So I start with a stand-up. So I'm project managing for a pod of consultants and developers. So, and we probably have a book of like 30 to 50 clients, not all of them active at once. We're very like agile. Like if a client needs us for like a specific project, we'll be all out. Other times it's like just kind of like support as we go, da 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 da. So 30 minutes of I'm kind of checking on, hey, where are we with this one, this one, this one, this one? Then we'll review new tickets. I use Trello with a Unito power up that so other consultants can send things to the queue. So I can have developers or another consultant do it. Assign those out. We'll kind of like size them, and be like, okay, is the billable hours that they think reasonable, like sort of thing, make sure it makes sense, put it into the queue, assign it or queue it, figure out the due dates. And we also transition. So our head of development his name is Ben Smith. He's incredible. And I'm trying to get him out of like actually doing things and like developing talent. So we'll have Professor Ben Corner. And then after that, I'm usually on meetings with clients, kind of touching base, kind of, this is the part I love the best, just kind of like being like a life coach for my clients, being like, okay, what can we take off your plate? What stinks? What can we grab? Talking through what the actual problem is. I'm like, forget that I'm a Salesforce consultant. Just talk to me about what's going on with your business. What's your situation? What's the biggest pain right now? What would be wonderful? So I'll kind of take that back and turn it into tickets and talk through my team. So usually Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I like load up with a lot of meetings. And then Tuesday and Thursday, I like to just block off for like productivity flow, because my favorite thing to do is just kind of lose time just like building something fun. Like so yeah, and then in between meetings and doing stuff, I have like 3 Slack communities, and I like to like see what's going on in other people's worlds, reply to things that I know. And LinkedIn, I like to put up a meme a couple times a week, make people laugh. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, well, we are at our last minute, which is crazy. I know. I want everyone that's still on here to know we had like a whole list of questions that we were hoping to get through, but you'll have to join us next time. So easy fix there. The one question that I would like to have you guys kind of rapid fire answer is if someone was to walk away with one nugget from today, just one thing, what would you make be the most important?
One thing?
Just one. Maybe two if you have to.
It's about people.
Yeah.
It's about people. And just remember that you're designing solutions for people. You're prioritizing things for people. You're doing something for your sales reps so they can better connect live with people. So design everything you do, how you run your day, how you run your meetings, how you design things. Think about the people.
I love that.
I was going to say just bug Jackie anytime you have a Salesforce question, because she'll probably answer. It's definitely like, I'm only half kidding about that, by the way. One thing's tough. I would say like there will always be something that can be better, faster, easier, which means there will always be an opportunity to be more operational, whether that means going into operations again, like a specific role, or just being more operational in your current role. I just want to shout out, by the way, like it's a big decision to think about making career switches. So like huge thanks to all the SDRs who joined, even managers and directors. Whether again you're considering a formal switch or you're just kind of curious about how to be more operational in your current role. So I would say like maintain the optimism that there are things to do to like kind of become more operational in that respect. And I also want to just say like thank you everyone for kind of giving us the time. And there are tons and tons of smart folks out there in the operational world. So if I can add a bonus thing, it's just reach out and kind of to us, but also like to anyone in the community, because I think it's a super helpful community of folks who are willing to help and share their knowledge.
I love that. Absolutely love it. I know we didn't get to everything that we wanted, but this was absolutely amazing. Thank you both so much. I had dropped everyone's LinkedIn's much early on. So scroll through that, chat super fast, find it, connect with these two fabulous humans. I am so honored to have been able to kind of talk about this with both of you. And I see in the chat, welcome to some of our new first Sales Hacker webinar attendees. Hopefully we'll see you in a bunch more. And as always, don't forget to join us at saleshacker.com. We have a community of over 21,000 members globally. We are the largest community right now, which is super exciting. But we do webinars Tuesday, Thursdays. We've got some great workshops coming up talking about hiring. We've got one with Tita Bork coming up. And we've just got all the things. But I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you. And have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the upcoming weekend, and we'll talk soon.